Welcome to the refuge program.
You cannot be born a homosexual. This is a lie. It's a choice.
Go. Fake it till you make it. Become the man you are not. Save yourself.
When you first decided to sort of direct this story, what resonated with you? And then for you, what elements of the experience did you feel like it was most important that he get right, that, you know, would sort of assuage any concerns you would have?
What struck me most about the memoir was, you know, I'd gone in expecting more kind of viciousness and violence and hateful intention. And it really struck me that I hadn't acknowledged ahead of time, and I was about to learn, that the decisions and motivations to send young people to conversion therapy and the reason they exist is actually strangely born out of a love and a need to help, or a feeling like it's there to help. And that was more complicated than my initial impression. And the fact that Garrard's mother was willing to acknowledge that that may have been a mistake, that maybe it hurt more than helped, made it a reason to turn the memoir into a film, because it had a hopefulness to it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, Joel was ready to meet with other survivors of conversion therapy. That was the thing I wanted to really happen, because I trusted him as an artist. I'd seen his work before, but I just wanted to make sure he got all the sides, you know, saw everything with its complexity. So he met with survivors, he hung out with my mom and dad, Lucas did as well, and so did the co-producer of the film, David Craig. And, you know, just felt like he was ready to take the story on.
What came naturally was the sense of feeling different and alone on an island, just really isolated from the community that I live in. That came naturally. What was a stretch for me was the extent to which I feel like isolated, because this character experiences it to a much greater degree than I do. So it was about it was less about transforming and understanding something that's totally foreign as much as it was turning the volume up on something I understand.
One of the challenges is distilling a person's story, you know, whether it's the pages of the memoir or you know, that period of years, how to distill that and how to distill character and their important moments and transitions into a 2-hour film.
Was it difficult for either of you in the writing or the directing to balance sort of the parallel journeys of Jared and then his parents in terms of coming to terms with him?
Well, it's definitely difficult for me, because it did feel like, on one hand, you've got one half of the movie is a conversion therapy, and we're shining a light on that, but it has to all feed into the family story, which to me is the most important aspect of it. It's the most relatable aspect, and conversion therapy was really just one of the choices and obstacles in the choices that destroyed a family to a degree, or dismantled them, and was an obstacle to them rebuilding themselves.
Yeah, well, I talked to Joel a lot about this, because it is really hard to, it's very hard to map out a whole journey and to understand what that is and what that looks like. But what is manageable is to just go in and do the scene that you're supposed to do. And my job was just to do each scene one step at a time and trust that Joel would fold it together into a narrative. There's some pressure you experience when you're the son of a preacher in a community, that everybody looks to you to be something big. You know, you're like, if your father's a prophet of some kind or is sharing the word of God to everyone, which is the most precious thing in this community, then you have to step up too.
I knew I couldn't write the book unless I knew what was in my mom's head, for example, or what was in my dad's head, and in many ways what was in the counselors' heads that did this to me, because it felt like, you know, the easy pot shots that I could take against conversion therapy, they were all too simple, and good literature and good stories often have to find the motivations behind who, you know, you can even go to a murderer on death row and they'll probably tell you why what they did wasn't wrong. And I do think that we all are a few steps away from making horrible mistakes every second of our lives. And so when someone does make a mistake, you hold them accountable, but you also try to understand why they're doing it, because otherwise you don't get any insight. And I knew that was incredibly important for the story.